Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. The combined Senate committees have begun work on an amendment to the Supreme Court law. A specially convened session of the Senate will be held tomorrow. Even if there are further corrective amendments, these will be rejected by the Sejm, because only in the bill's current form will a prompt payment of funds from the National Reconstruction Plan to Poland be made by Brussels. Prime Minister Morawiecki is calling for the quick adoption of the amendment by the Senate. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki also called for the Senate to leave the bill unchanged. I'm counting on the Senate to pass this bill as soon as possible, preferably that it is passed without correction amendments, because then it could go to the President as soon as possible. The Senate majority, however, remains adamant and plans to table not one, not several, but a dozen amendments. If it is in the milestones that disciplinary cases of judges are handled by one of the chambers of the Supreme Court, then the Supreme Administrative Court is not a chamber of the Supreme Court. There is a provision in the Constitution that very clearly defines the powers of the Supreme Administrative Court. Disciplinary cases are not there. We are passing this law to obtain funds from the National Reconstruction Plan. This law is agreed with the European Commission. One of the amendments stipulates that in the criminal chamber of the Supreme Court, only judges with 7 years of experience will be allowed to rule. According to the opposition, this is to prevent judges appointed by the current National Judicial Council from deciding disciplinary cases. We, as Solidarna Polska, strongly oppose this law in general. We believe that it is bad, unconstitutional, and is precisely this Brussels blackmail. No one will sack the judges. If they're excluded from the formations, then they will adjudicate less. But a mess will be created for the citizens, and that's what this is about. The chairwoman of the National Judicial Council has announced that she will challenge the amendment to the Supreme Court law before the Constitutional Court. The first president of the Supreme Court is also raising objections to the law. The law violates the procedures for appointing judges expressed in the Constitution. Second, it violates the principle of independence of judges. Third, this law will certainly lead to a deepening of the chaos in the judiciary and a violation of the three divisions of power. If there are these kinds of doubts, then the bodies that have the authority to file motions with the Constitutional Court may do so. During a conference in Sedlice, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki announced that the timing of the government's application for the disbursement of funds from the National Reconstruction Plan will depend on the issue of Parliament's passing of amendments to the Supreme Court law. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki and Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defence Mariusz Błaszczak visited the 18th Mechanized Division in Siedlce. The war in Ukraine makes it necessary for Poland to arm itself even more quickly, and for the Polish government, the highest absolute priority is to increase the strength of the Polish army and strengthen the presence of NATO troops on Polish territory, Morawiecki said.
Today, the state of the Polish army is more than 1/4 larger than it was back in 2015. There is no strong state without a strong army. But also, there will never be, dear compatriots, there will never be a strong army without a strong state, without strong public finances. This year, we will make an unprecedented effort, 4% to GDP for the Polish military. This will perhaps be the largest percentage of money allocated to the army among all NATO countries. This will be a clear proof for all countries. We will defend our land. Poland is safe. During the rule of the Civic Platform, Polish People's Party coalition, 629 organizational units of the Polish army were abolished. The rulers of Poland at the time dealt a particularly heavy blow to the security of our homeland, in the east of our country. Those units were liquidated that were responsible for security in the direction of the Brest Gate, a direction that historically has always been very threatening to the security of our homeland. The breakthrough came in 2015, when Mr. Andrzej Duda became president of Poland and when Law and Justice took over the government. In 2018, we ordered the Patriot system. In 2019, we ordered HIMARS missiles. In 2020, we ordered F-35s. We ordered Bayraktars, and we reactivated the division. The 18th Iron Mechanized Division has just been established with its headquarters here in Siedlce. Behind us, you can already see the barracks built. This year, they will be put into operation. It is in these barracks that the soldiers of the Polish army serve, in this division.
Olimpikach służą żołnierze Wojska Polskiego w tej dywizji.
Day 341 of the war in Ukraine. The Russian assault in the Donetsk region continues. President Volodymyr Zelensky is appealing to allies to speed up arms deliveries. Zelensky was also critical of the International Olympic Committee's efforts to allow Russian athletes to participate in the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris. The International Olympic Committee's attempts to get Russian athletes back to compete and participate in the Olympics is an attempt to tell the world that terror can be viewed as something acceptable. As if we could turn a blind eye to what Russia is doing in Kherson, Kharkiv, Bakhmut and Avdiivka. Today I sent a letter to President Macron about this very issue. As we prepare for the Paris Olympics, we must be sure that Russia will not be able to use it or any other international sports event to promote aggression or its state chauvinism. In the first half of the 20th century, too many mistakes were made in Europe that led to very terrible tragedies. There was also a major Olympic mistake. The Olympic movement and terrorist states definitely should not intersect. The enemy does not count personnel and, despite numerous casualties, keeps the intensity of its attacks high. In some of its wars, Russia had suffered fewer losses than it faced here, particularly near Bakhmut. And this can only be countered by extraordinary resilience and a complete awareness that our soldiers are defending the whole of Ukraine when they defend the Donetsk region. The situation is very tough. Bakhmut, Vuhledar and other areas in the Donetsk region are under constant Russian assault. There are constant attempts to break through our defences. Russia hopes to drag out the war and exhaust our forces. So we have to make time our weapon. We have to accelerate developments. We have to speed up the supply and launch of new necessary military options for Ukraine. Speed of supply has been and will be one of the key factors in this war. The United States Secretary of State is joining efforts to calm the situation in Israel and Palestine. Antony Blinken visited Ramallah and Jerusalem today to talk with parties to the conflict. He arrived in the Middle East just hours after a wave of attacks in Jerusalem.
There is no question that this is a very difficult moment. We've seen the horrific terrorist attacks in recent days. We've seen over many months rising violence that is affecting so many. As you heard very clearly, the condemnation from the United States of the terrorist attacks, the President, the Vice President, myself, and we deplore overall the loss of innocent civilian life. We'll be reiterating that message and encouraging the parties to take steps. And Egypt, like us, is a stalwart believer in the negotiated two-state solution. The only path to a lasting resolution of the conflict and, critically, equal measures of democracy, opportunity, and dignity for Israelis and Palestinians.
It's the responsibility of everyone to take steps to calm tensions rather than inflame them, to work toward a day when people no longer feel afraid in their communities, in their homes, in their places of worship. That is the only way to halt the rising tide of violence that has taken too many lives, too many Israelis, too many Palestinians. I'll make that clear throughout my time in Israel and the West Bank with everyone that I meet.
That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, have a good night and a better tomorrow.